Thank you, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. We've had this bill for a while now, and I was waiting for minutes for the other ones. But I wanted to come down and speak on this, and I know some people are probably growing over that. But this is obviously an issue that I care about very much, and I wanted to just explain it a little bit. In this chamber, you meet people, or outside here, you meet people, and sometimes you don't ever really know the history of someone or anything like that. I ended up, what I consider my father-in-law, when I ended up getting into labor issues in the logging industry and staged a demonstration back in '98. He'd been my father-in-law for a number of years. Now, I had no idea that he was an officer in the Maine Woodsman Association back in the early '70s and had staged a number of labor issues of his own. And that's kind of the way it is in the logging industry. You don't really hear about those things too much because people sometimes don't want them to get out there, to the extent. And I understand that quite a lot better now than I did back then. But one of the things that I found interesting about this debate was that my good friend, former colleague, Senator Mike Carpenter, actually proposed something that should have been really meaningful in this state back in 1983. And I've passed out the actual floor debate, legislative records. It was in the Senate March 15, 1984. And I'm going to read that today to put it back in the record, 40 some years later. The other thing that I found interesting about that I didn't know, and I know I'm going down my own memory lane here, is that a former senator from this chamber and House rep from this chamber, Reynold Theriault, was one of the people that spoke passionately on the House side during this period. And that was really surprising me. Not that he did, but I just had never heard about that. I met Senator Theriault back in the 7th grade. He ended up being a long-term sub for me in St. Francis Elementary School. He was a state senator at that time, and it was out of session, and he was there for months. He was actually the gentleman that organized the first time that me and a bunch of the other 8th graders ever went to fly in a plane in Frenchville. We gave him a hard time. I remember Senator Rafferty talking about all the tough things he did back in his time. I really wish I hadn't been quite the kid I was to Senator Theriault back then. But what I found interesting about that, or not interesting, what I really hold dear now, is that Senator Theriault was a Democrat from Fort Kent in a time that being a Democrat in Fort Kent was the only way you got elected. And he was down here for a long time, and somewhere along the line, he got very frustrated with politics. And I know that feeling too. And he switched to become a Republican in an area that you just couldn't do that back then. And he lost his next election. And I always had great admiration for that. That not that he lost, but that he was willing to he was willing to go out on something that he believed a lot about. And years later, whenever I decided to run, and of course people know the whole story. I've been everything. But at the time that I really got a chance to deal with him a lot more, I was unenrolled. And I hadn't been elected, and I was trying to get elected. And he was just like so supportive, it wasn't even funny. And I had been through this whole logging scrape, and everybody in the area knew about it, and he did too, but he never did bring it up, how involved he was down here on these issues during that period. And unfortunately now he's passed, and I don't have the ability to talk to him about it. But I find it very striking that somebody 40 years ago dealt with this, and here I am standing here today, and probably in the same scenario that he was, But what I also, when you read the testimony, I mean, what the bill was the period was where people were going what we refer to as butt scale or stick scale, meaning that every individual tree had to be sized, and there was a scale, a chart that gave you what you would get for pay for that individual size tree. And it was a challenge for so many reasons to get paid that way. And there's a lot of ability to get shortchanged in a scale like that. And so the idea over time was to go to a weight scale. And that too became challenging because people would cut wood and it would sit there forever and ever and ever, and they wouldn't get paid for it. And when it was sitting there, it would dry out. And that meant that you lost money because you were losing weight and you were paid on a weight scale. And so the bill that they were trying to enact during that time, Senator Carpenter, Senator Representative Terrio, and others, was what we referred to, some people referred to it as 14-day rule, others referred to it as 15-day rule. But what it means is after 14 days, on the 15th day, you can ask for a butt scale, meaning that your wood is drying out, and instead of going on weight, you can ask for a scale so that you can get paid. Even though the scale system is not awesome, or it can be messed around with, you can get paid on the scale system. And that is what we have in effect today. That's what they passed, was the 15-day rule. And that you can get a licensed state scaler to come in and scale your wood and get paid in a timely manner. And back then, there's a gentleman all the way down from York County, and he was so appropriately named, it's funny, his name is Senator Wood. I don't know who that is, but Senator Wood spoke on the Senate floor about this 15-day rule. And he said, "There's come to my attention an incident that the rest of the Senate, and for that matter the whole state, should be aware of. Last Friday was a historic day in the legislature, and that was the first time that I have seen a number of people that actually work in the woods come down here to testify on the wood measurement bill. It was not the lobbyists, it was not the large paper companies that have for too long controlled the system in this state, but actually the people that go in there, fell the trees, twitch them out, yard them, that are here to testify on the wood measurement bill. These are the people that face the environmental elements that in the woods, and then face the economic elements of not knowing exactly what it is that they're getting paid for. They have no benefits, they have no pension, they have no health insurance, and they came to Augusta because we are their body of last resort for the people. And I would like to share with you a letter that I received from one of the wives of the workers that came down. Quote, "We want to express our gratitude to you for supporting improvements in the wood measurement law. For many years now, the small guy, the logger, has been taken over the coals by the paper companies. Every time that we spoke for what we believed was right, we were labeled as troublemakers. For the first time at the committee hearing Friday, we felt that some of our problems were really being heard, and it was encouraging. Our livelihood depends on a method that we understand, a scale method that we understand and verify. We need strong penalties for companies that do not obey the law. The only thing that we were asking is an honest day's pay for an honest day's work." And during that hearing, it came to our attention that one of these people, one of the workers that testified at the previous hearing, had been visited by the company after he testified. And I have not been able to ascertain the nature of the visit, but the implication was that it was to intimidate as a body, and I find that reprehensible. These people are citizens like the rest of us, and they have the right to offer their testimony without fear of economic reprisals by the companies they work for. If that action is still going on by these companies, I'd urge them to cease and desist immediately. Well, that is like deja vu all over again. You read that, and it reminds me of everything that I know and everything I've ever gone through in my life. But what I also found interesting about that testimony was that Kay Evans, who was then the director of Bureau of Public Services, Department of Agriculture, Food and Rural Services, has a whole thing here that I provided that she too is speaking in favor of this wood measurement law. The department that actually has to enforce it is going to speak in favor of it back then. Well, flash forward 40 years, and you know, this is something that during the time that I was on the Ag Committee, I mean, we had people come in and talk about this. No one asked for this wood measurement. No one asked for this stick scale. And why is that? Maybe it's because of the things that Mr. Wood talked about 40 years previously, that people felt that they would be intimidated, that they might be blacklisted. But what I do know is that over the last 2 years, because of the high price of fuel, people that took it for years and years, by waiting to get paid, waiting sometimes up to a year to get paid, decided that they couldn't wait anymore because they couldn't afford to have the fuel bill continue the way it was, or they couldn't get fuel delivered anymore. And all of a sudden people started calling me and asking me what they could do. And I said, well, the 15-day rule. Let's call the department, ask the department to come out and stick scale your wood. You'll get paid something anyways. There'll be some record from a legitimate licensed state scaler that you'll get paid. And what did I find from that? When I called, well, we never heard of that law. Well, you never heard of the law? What do you mean? We never heard of anything like that. So I send the entire statute to the department. Well, we don't know anything about that. That doesn't. And then I talk to people in the Attorney General's office. They don't know anything about it either. So there's a law that 40 years ago people came down here and fought for to try and help get paid. And here today, it doesn't work. I mean, people don't even know about it, and people won't enforce it. So the bill that we have in front of us is a direct result of the fact that people wanted to get paid, just paid for their wood. The rates are awful, but at least get paid for what they did. And you can't turn to your government to actually do that. You can't turn to anyone here to get help. And 40 years ago, Mr. Wood talked about people being intimidated. Why is it any different today when you know that the government's not going to help you? So this bill that we're hopefully going to enact here shortly is something that actually says that, well, not only do you have the right to do this, but within 30 days, the landowners have to pay you. And what we found out in the committee here, which I thought was really striking too, was there's already a law that if you're the landowner and you're working for them and you're doing stumpage where you have to pay them, there's a law that says you have to pay them in 45 days. But the heck with the logger, don't matter. And I just find that so infuriating that, you know, they could come here and argue for them to get paid, but nobody else should have that same benefit. So this law, all it does is it says within 30 days, they have to come up with a way to pay you. I mean, most businesses have that same type of scenario. They'll send out a payment or a record for somebody that has done service to get paid, be it a tax accountant, be it a lawyer, you know, be it a plumber, whatever, electrician. People get paid. That's how the world works. When you do the service, you get paid. And so that's what this bill does. It also has a provision in there that the department that 40 years ago was tasked with doing scales, if somebody asked for it, we'll go out and do random spot checks so that maybe we can just keep people honest, on guard, that they'll go out and do a couple so that landowners know that there is somebody at least keeping a little bit of an eye on it. And so I'm hoping that people is going to vote for this today. You know, I've heard in this chamber a lot about foreign influence. Well, this is an issue right here of massive foreign influence in the logging industry. I've heard people have asked me, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I need help in this chamber. I need help to get paid. I need help to get paid, for my logging, for my wood. Well, I would say that starting with the law that says that you should get paid within 30 days would be a start to actually getting paid. And then I've had other people talk to me about how they've had people pick them up when their snowmobiles broke down, and heard the stories about about how they're getting shafted in the industry. So, you know, it seems like we all know what's going on. There's a law here that has been enacted. A lot of people came down here and put themselves on the line, put themselves in the hall, you know, showed their head, got up out of the, picked their head up out of the mud and said, you know what, could you at least pay us the poor wages that we're getting when we actually do the work for you? And still, people are saying, well, no, this is too hard. This is something that you can't do, that we shouldn't do. And I just find that just incredible that in this day and age, it is still a problem. 40 years later, still a problem just to get paid for your hard work. I don't understand. I don't know what occupation would allow this to happen other than the logging industry. So with that, I hope that we can get a 35-0 report on this enactment. Here we go.
The chair